Inflation is rising in the United States of America. In past economic cycles, the world has seen inflation, deflation, followed by hyperinflation and an economic crash. You may question, where are we on that cycle now? Many of today's experts say a market crash is close at hand. However, rising prices of land may still continue. Sources report that China and Russia are working together to create banking lines that bypass Western sanctioning controls for bad deeds, and the elimination of SWIFT codes that are used to create sanctions against countries doing business around the world by blocking electronic transactions against sanctioned groups. Major news outlets have reported that the U.S. is not ready for the fallout from rulings that will be handed down by the U.S. Supreme Court in the future. If you are asking, what can I do? On this show, we help offer some answers to those questions and more, because you've landed on Rockbottom Survival Skills, John Elden Gibbons and Teresa S. Landry.
Views expressed on this podcast are our opinions and based on our personal experiences and are not meant to be professional, financial, or legal advice in any way, shape, or form.
Welcome to Rockbottom Survival Skills. I'm John Elden Gibbons. Well, welcome today, and to start things off, I got to tell you my lovely and talented wife Teresa is not going to join us today, and the reason why is that she's actually doing a product launch. It's one of those things we do. It's part of how you have to make money. We talk about that a lot, and if you get Rockbottom Survival Skills, the book, which of course you can get on rockbottomsurvivalskills.com, you will find that we talk a lot about income production, because you know what? It really, really is important. All right, moving along. The topic for today is 12 essentials in every pack and the 5 skills that matter. We're going to go a little old school, and we're going to talk about being in the outdoors, what you need. This could apply also just quite as easily for something like a bug out bag. Now, I really want to be clear here. These are the fundamental building blocks and skills that you need. Now, we discuss all of this in Rockbottom Survival Skills. However, let's take a look at exactly where we start from. Oh, and before we get started, I guess I better let you know we're going to do a little news from around the world. So, as you may have heard, Russia has increased border troops. Shootings continue in the Ukraine. What does that mean? They're shooting. There are skirmishes on the border, and they're fairly commonplace. You don't seem to get that report in the mainstream. Most likely, these are Ukraine separatists backed by Putin. The question with this is always, are these really Ukrainian separatists, or are they Russian provocateurs? Not uncommon as part of the Russian military strategy in the past. Flooding and extreme atmospheric rivers may well be a future common trend, combined with droughts in the West. Say, what? What do you mean? You're going to have flooding and drought? Yeah, this is really whacked, right? Imagine you want to fill a glass with a fire hose at full throttle. Or would you rather gently flow water from a fountain to fill your glass over a much longer period? In the first part, the water comes and goes. It's quick, it's all over the place, it never really gets trapped, it just runs off, and it will do damage along the way. The forces will erode and destroy things in their path. When it's gone, it's gone. Because calmer atmospheric rivers, because really the West depends on these atmospheric rivers, will allow the water to soak into the land. And this is how we prevent droughts. So what happens is we have this really weird situation where you get one part where you get too much water all at once, and another part where you allow it to soak in. Well, let's move on a little bit to the good. A former homeless person in England decorated his home with 16,000 lights to raise money for homeless relief charities. Once again, this shows the importance of being able to help yourself in order to help others. He was able to do that. By the way, there are many people across this holiday season who will do light displays to raise funds for not-for-profits. I applaud them. Congratulations and thank you for all of your good works. So let's move on a little bit to the funny. The Saudi Arabian press agency Saudi press agency has reported that authorities in Saudi Arabia have conducted a crackdown during an annual camel beauty contest. It seems that an unsettling amount of camels have received Botox injections along with other, quote, touch-ups during this contest. As a result of this crackdown, 40 camels were disqualified from the annual camel beauty pageant. Which kind of reminds me I probably should get a little work done myself. Topics for today. The topic for today are the 12 essentials in every pack and the 5 skills that matter. So let's start right off with the 5 skills that matter. As you may or may not know, these skills are first aid, sheltercraft, which also includes firecrafts, because what we're trying to do is change or maintain an environment. Now, cooling is also part of that. Water procurement and purification, as well as storage of water. Tool construction is number 4. And then finally, we're looking at navigation and transportation. How are you going to get yourself in and out of an area, and how are you going to make sure you know you're going in the right direction? All right, before we go into each of those skills a little more in detail, let's talk about the basic needs. And really, this comes from a lot of, military units, training. It goes back a long way, and it was called the rule of threes. And the rule goes something like this. You've got 3 minutes that you can live without air. You have 3 hours that you can live without shelter. You have 3 days that you can live without water, and 3 weeks that you can live without food. Now, let's face it, there's no way at all that is going to be a pleasant experience, just given the way it's laid out. However, what I want to look at for these basic needs, it was always, by the way, that was always kind of to use the idea that you really didn't need food as much as you think you did. Because, I mean, the jump between 3 days and 3 weeks is huge. But we're going to talk about that. So let's go back on these 5 skills that you really matter and that you really need to understand. First and foremost is first aid. If you think about it, if you only have 3 minutes of air, this air can also include your blood supply. It can include anything that keeps you alive. And first aid is that number one point. The other thing is, obviously, you got to know how to swim to get out of the water. Make sure you take care of yourself in a boat so that if you fall over, that you have a flotation device. I mean, this goes on, but really we get to the fundamental understanding of first aid. If you want to start from the beginning, from anywhere at all, the first thing you should do is probably take a first aid course. In fact, I would go beyond probably. I would say go take a first aid course. If you want to then follow up from the first aid course, as part of this, look at taking, if you're not a good swimmer, become a good swimmer. If you are a good swimmer, think about taking a life-saving course or a lifeguard course, even if it's a mini course, even if it's just how to, help somebody on the side of a pond, let's say, some kind of ice rescue. Any of these safety kind of courses, I highly recommend. That includes a boater safety course. Now, first aid, obviously, we look at what kind of kits you should carry. You want to look at learning expedient, or what I would call first aid in the bush or first aid in the wilderness first aid. I was at one time a solo instructor, a wilderness first responder instructor, as well as an EMT. But I tell you that by virtue of the fact that I always had to keep those skills up. Now, I've got to the point where I need to take refreshers too. I have to go in, so keep those cards up. And some of them are required. Like if you want to get a guide's license, you're going to have your first aid CPR cards current. Because things do change over time. Next, we talk about sheltercraft. Now, sheltercraft, the idea is to create what we call a micro-environment. Well, what's a microenvironment, you ask? It's one where you control it, where this small space is controlled on a much larger environment. So, If you are in the wilderness and it is snowing and it just dropped below zero, then you're going to need to make sure that you in some way keep your heat. Now, clothing is the first response to that. It is possible to be in the right clothes and just kind of hunker down and be okay. There are other techniques that will help you on top of that. One of those, of course, is to be able to build a shelter or provide a shelter such as a tent. Now, I've been in the middle of the winter with wind chills, and I was sitting out, and I've taken, now by the way, wind chill factor is not supposed to be affected by temperature. Okay, that is the effect of your skin, of how your skin reacts to the wind. And it's kind of like, if you think of a convection oven, which by the way, it works both ways, heat and cold. If it's cold, then you're going to get colder because of the wind chill. That has an effect on your skin. And if it is hotter, you will cook. I mean, just like a convection oven, you look at the Santa Anas out west. It is really important to understand that the sheltering part is to increase and decrease, both increase heat retention as well as decrease things like wind effect on you, create a shade for you to reduce heat if necessary in a desert situation. What about firecraft? Well, we can alter that shelter's temperature with firecraft. Now, we're not talking about, but we should include in here things like mechanism of heat loss. Now, we cover all of this stuff, obviously, but the whole point is that if I'm throwing out some of these terms and we only have so much time today, almost each one of these could be and will be potentially its own podcast, video production. So let's move on to water procurement. Oh, one tip, sheltercraft. Something could be as simple, and I'm going to give you a tip, as creating a situation where you're going to bring a couple of bags, like garbage bags, right? And you can fill those garbage bags with debris. That could be anything from leaf litter to any kind of fluffy, softer, something that, and even if it does poke a hole in the bag, sticks, let's say, and you can build that up in the bag, and you're going to create a layer that you can either sit on or throw over you and create a blanket very quickly in a bad situation. Obviously, if you put snow in there, you can get insulation around you, but the problem is when you put it up next to you, you create a thermal conduction, and you want to really be insulated from that. That's not the point. You want to be in an insulated situation. And that's why sitting directly on a rock, sitting directly on the cold snow without any kind of insulation is not going to help. Now, if you're in a raised bag, then you've got an air gap between you and the snow. So that's why I say you can use it to sit on. Also with firecraft, we're able to do something else, which is water procurement. Now, in a snow situation, we can melt water. In a snow situation, we can melt snow and ice to create water. We can also purify water, and we can also, actually produce containers with fire. And what we would do there is what we call coal burning. So I would take and either split or get a piece of log or a piece of tree, a larger limb perhaps, and then I might burn that out to create a crevice or an area in which I can add water to or store water in. Now, this is done obviously with larger logs, and then you have to separate them, and you got to figure out how to bring, you're going to create tools in which you can do that. In other words, move the water to the storage area if you need to. You can also create canteens in this fashion as well. But in any event, you're creating a storage device. And again, that builds on the firecraft that we discussed earlier. There are other ways to do everything. I mean, this is not the only cut and dry way. Now, I'm giving you a lot more kind of primitive things. Well, the bottom line is that maybe you should be bringing a survival kit or extra gear that we'll get to in the essentials so that you can cover a lot of this stuff. You don't have to make it. I'm just telling you what you need and why for those skills. Next, we talk about tool construction. And tool construction is really about being able to make shelters, being able to make these water purification devices or these water storage or create fire. If you know from what's in your head how to transfer that knowledge to your hands and take action on it and make something, you can create what you need. I'm not a huge advocate of depending on gear and equipment. I recently, like everybody else, I go to forums, and I was checking out one where somebody was talking about, don't you have anything for the poor people? And I'm thinking, okay, well spoken, Dara. It's like, it's not even that you're poor. What about the people that just don't have resources? You don't need to be poor and not have a resource when you're in the middle of a survival situation. If you're in a survival situation and you don't have the implements, you've got to either make them or find them. And that is largely dependent upon resources available to the area in which you are at. Put someone in a desert situation who is not familiar with the resources there, and they are used to traveling the, eastern forest areas, they will find a completely different set of skills are necessary, that they've got to have knowledge bases that are necessary. So it's really important that you understand that the resources and the geographic locations will make a difference. I once wrote an article about a primitive, and by the way, the word primitive, I'm talking like maybe Neanderthal, all right? Because here's the deal. There really are no, quote, primitive cultures. It's one thing I learned in anthropology years ago was this is our perception as, as the West, as the people who have technologically advanced. Well, let me tell you something. If you've never looked at or tried to make a Clovis point or any kind of point in flint knapping, you gotta stop and say, wow, these people were really technologically advanced for their time, for what they had, for their development. And did they have a need to develop more? Well, they did. They developed a lot of other things that we do not, because they lived in harmony with their natural environment. And by the way, when they didn't live in harmony with their natural environment, they suffered the same consequences. This is part of the human condition. And I'm not specifically talking about North America. We are looking at all, indigenous peoples throughout the world. When you use the term primitive, which fortunately I try not to, but unfortunately it always creeps in the conversation when you're talking about skills. They are considered primitive skills. Flint knapping, for example. Certain kinds of fire production are considered, quote, primitive skills. Primitive bushcraft. In other words, they do not use advanced technologies. It's really unfortunate that we use that term. So if we were going to coin a new phrase from primitive, we might say that we are talking about earth-based. And you will hear that a lot, earth-based skills. I like that, earth-based skills. I will really attempt to use that more often. So thanks to everybody out there, because without me having these conversations, I don't even really get to that point. So look, okay, as usual, and my wife would say I've digressed. Let's talk again about tool construction. Knowing fundamental tools. What are you going to need? Well, you need something that can cut something. So that's pretty easy to make in the woods. Believe it or not, it really is. But it comes at the price of learning it and finding the right resources. The question then becomes, how effective is that cutting tool? That is a different conversation. If you're going to use something to skin an animal, let's say, or cut a plant or dig a root, those are really easy to build. If you want to cut rope, I can make something pretty quickly that will cut a rope. You start getting into finite wood carving, and now you're in a bit of a different situation. However, if you want to use a simple constructed knife to do tasks like debarking something, that's easy enough. If you want to make a needle, now I'm adding other tools here, right? It's not all about cutting. Some of it's now we're moving on to puncturing. And really, when you look at these tools, you ask yourself, what do they do? Does it cut? Does it puncture? Is it used to create fire? These are the kind of things that, and when I say puncturing, is it for sewing? Understanding how to make these tools in a wilderness setting, to me, is fundamental. And if you don't have it, then you need to cover yourself with the fact that you brought it with you. Or you got to ask another question, how long does it take me to make that? Now, if I want to make something, it may not take me long to make a needle. I can take a bone piece and I can smash it. I can make something that will pass as a needle fairly quickly, but then I got to make something like a pump drill to put the hole in it, and that's going to take me longer. And then also just finding that bone may be hard. It may not be around the area that I'm looking at. It may not show up when I need it. I may have to go scavenge for it. I may have to search. It could take me miles. It could take you days. If you're carrying something simple or you're modifying something that you already have, then you're able to meet your needs quicker and more efficiently. You also have to ask yourself the basic fundamental question, what are my basic needs going to be, as we talked about, to keep me alive, and how long? One of the things that everyone always asks is, what is your final outcome? I always ask that. I ask what we make, what we build, what we do. In any endeavor, I want to know what is our final outcome. Now, in most cases, your final outcome may be as simple as surviving 24 to 38 hours, 36, 32 hours, 72 hours, because either one, you're expecting someone to come get you, or you are thinking, I'm in the woods overnight because I went hiking and I got stuck and I need to just get through tonight, and then when the sun comes up, I'll be able to get out of here. Or, did I have an accident? Now I got a whole different problem. I always associate the difference between what is a survival situation and what is an emergency situation. Good example, quick story. I was on a mountain, and I had an accident. And I decided with a group of people, because everybody's doing it, that I would slide down an ice fall because it was faster. The instant I did it, I knew I was wrong. Now, what happened is I was traveling way too fast. I put my foot out to stop and I caught it on a branch and I snapped my ankle. After a 90-degree snap on my ankle, I was 2 miles in. You can imagine that I had to get out of there. Well, it just so happened that the group we were with always carried a sat phone, so that probably wasn't too bad to get an extract. And I did get extracted. I had 2 forest rangers come in. And they brought in a helicopter. They put me in a harness and took me up about 120 feet in the air and winched me in and took me to the hospital. And I have a plate now and 7 screws. So, as you can imagine, by the way, they didn't think I was going to walk again. I was climbing mountains within 6 months after that. Now, partly that's because I had a good doctor, great doctor. The other part of that is I wasn't going to be stopped, and I'm not going to be. If you want to do something, you have to do it. There's no question. And here's the other part now. As we get older, one of the things that we talk about that I'm not mentioning as a skill, but it's a need, is your health. You need your health to be good. You need your physical prowess to be good. You need to work out. I'm going back to the gym. I have equipment. I have a rowing machine. I have, some of that stuff is in storage. And I don't need to. I've actually built equipment here that looks something like it came out of, a cartoon. But it's weights, right? A bucket with rocks in it, with a pulley. You've probably seen the guy who was in the movie, right? Who was doing the fight, and he had to make everything. Well, that's kind of stuff I was using, and it works great. There's nothing wrong with it. I look at it not even look at it. If I'm looking at it, I'm wrong. If I'm not using it, then I'm wrong. But when I'm using it, I'm thinking, you know what? This doesn't. I have bought really expensive Smith systems in the past. Now, I want you to hear a trend here. I have never advocated at all living poor, ever. This is not about living poor. Now, it is about living deliberately. If you don't want to buy stuff, don't buy it. But you should never be stopped or put to the point where you can't do something. All right? I mean, and what I do specifically, by the way, you don't have to do what I do, obviously. Go do what you want to do. I love sailing. I have a small boat. I've had other boats in the past, and some of them have come and gone. And as I have said, reoccurring, over and again, things do not matter. People matter. We can replace things. Now, here's the deal. What boat am I looking at next? And we're going to talk about that in the future. And my wife signed on to the idea. Is I'm looking for a Corsair, probably 27, maybe a 31, a trimaran that folds. I like trailerable boats. I know it's a little light, but it will sail. I mean, it's capable of sailing around the world. The question is, will you have enough, supplies that you can carry to be comfortable and safe? That's always the issue. I have no intention of sailing past things like the lake, along the coasts. But the beauty is I can also put it on a trailer, put it on a truck, and take it to the West Coast, and then put it there, and then sail up to Alaska and hang out there a while, or put it on a trailer and go down to Mexico, depending on if the world is open for that. But the beauty is I'm not dependent on a travel lift. I don't have to worry about whether or not a marina is open. And I could just go hang out down in the Florida Keys for a while, which I love the Florida Keys, by the way. I love the Florida. You know what, man? I mean, really, Hemingway? Come on. What's not to love? All right. So, again, let's get back to, after tool construction, we're talking about navigation and transportation. If you can't find your direction from, north to south to east to west, and by the way, throw away the GPS, for God's sakes, and get a map, a paper map, and learn to draw a map. That is the one thing I lament more than anything else when people talk about map skills. Learn to draw the map. I have a book, which I got, that was probably a World War I book on map skills, and I'll try to get it up on the site so you can, to give you an idea what it is. And by the way, that site is woodfolks.com. We're trying, we have a lot of different sites that get directed to different places. So we've kind of settled on woodfolks.com as the site to, everything else is like, product related, but that's the site where we're going to kind of direct people. Woodfolks, WOODFOLKS.com. And the whole point is that we want to direct people there, so you're going to you find out about some of our upcoming projects, film projects, book projects. But fundamentally, we are homesteaders. And also, we want you to see what's going on here on the homestead, because we're doing a build, and we're going to talk more about that. What's coming next is we're going to increase our animal population, and much in some ways as kind of a problem, because like right now we have chickens, we have quail. By the way, the quails are producing more eggs right now than the chickens. And the reason why that they are producing more, which we really understood, is light. Okay, because we have them parked, we moved them, we built a new home for them, they seem really happy, they have enough heat, plenty of water and food, just as the chickens do. However, these guys get more light. And the reason why is it's like a shed-off light, right, from our camper, that the light is usually on. Now, I do try to turn it off because, like I said, we've gone back on grid, but it does matter for their production. I mean, we're seeing, like, I'm looking at the number of quail eggs again, going, well, it's either time to make pickled quail eggs, which I'll probably do a little thing on pickled quail eggs when we talk about the quail for sure. They're pretty decent. They're really good, and they're expensive, but you got them. You got to use the stuff that you have. We have yet to really use our quail the way we want. It was part of what we were going to do was meat production, and like everybody in this whole homesteading movement, we've run into problems from time to time, and some of those is nature has taken back. We had a fox attack, we had a potential weasel attack, we've had but we've learned. And we've had some really good stuff. We didn't lose, we were able to repopulate our quail population by hatching our own eggs. They've been doing really well. They're very hardy, and they're not bad. The other thing about quail that we'll get into, at a later date, is that they really do have a shorter life expectancy. Okay, navigation and transportation. You got to get yourself out of some place. So just like me with the accident, I had a helicopter ride in that case. Now, could I have got myself out another way? Absolutely. Would it have been fun? Heck no. Would it have been possible? Well, there's no way I was staying there. Either way, I would have gone. We were going to figure it out. And I don't care if it took me a day to get out, a little at a time. The fact was that it was available. But you may not be so lucky. Now, I've worked with other groups where we've had to wait to get transportation out. We're going to bring them out in a litter. That's possible too. So we get back to these skills that matter. You're going to be able to take care of yourself and provide for your first aid. You're going to have sheltercraft so you can keep yourself in a microclimate and keep from getting to what we used to call exposure, right? Which is really hyperthermia or hypothermia, too hot, too cold. You get rained on, you're going to protect yourself from that, which is going to cause heat loss. You're going to be able to create a fire, and then you're going to be able to get water, and you're going to store it, and you're going to purify it. You're going to have tools to make things and construct things, and you're going to have navigation and transportation. Now, these are going to take care of your basic needs, probably from a 24-hour period to, I guess maybe as much as 72 hours. We start to get into other skills. These are the 5 basic skills that matter. The next one is food procurement. But you see, I would argue that tool construction will give you a lot of your food procurement. The rest of that is understanding what you're going to gather or harvest and how to go about it. Tracking skills are included in there. Those are tool constructions that go the next step. And you don't really need tools to get certain kind of wild plants or trees that are edible. The problem is, are they available to your area? It is always a problem. And you know what? When you start down the path of learning these, which is really, and that we're going to do a whole show just on wild foods and tree gathering for food. And I got to tell you something. When you get down to that point, everywhere you go, you start looking. You start looking at everything around you and saying, well, that's edible. Well, I could do that. I could eat that. I could, this. And then at the very least, you may just identify it. Well, hey, that's a tamarack. Hey, that's a pine. Now, obviously, there's a difference here as far as edibility, but that's not the point. At least I can understand them. Start there as another way. Don't worry about whether something's edible. Start learning to identify things. Use your nature study. Nature study is a direct result of these 5 skills. You cannot navigate without understanding nature. You cannot do any kind of tool construction for gathering without knowing what tools are available, what resources are available. Okay, we're going to take a little break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about things like camping versus survival over time. Anyway, we'll be right back. I'm John Elden Gibbons, and this is Rockbottom Survival Skills. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back. I had to take care of our rescue dog, Sarge, who is a Rottweiler mix. And yeah, he's happy about the change in the weather because he's a Mississippi dog. The only problem is, I don't think he likes it up here in the cold that much, but he does. He loves it. He's a water dog. Hey, we're going to do a whole show about Sarge. We're going to talk about why you need a dog. All right. So let's get back to what we were talking about. The other things that you are looking at that are not really in addition, but you've got to ask these questions. What are your medical needs? Are you going to these are things you got to take care of, right? That's not the same as the skills. Okay, these are the things that you need to take care of. Your medical needs, your cognitive needs. If you are an addict at this point, you've got of anything. If you turn out to be that you're an addict of video games, it's time to get off the video games because you're not going to get to the out of doors. What you see on that screen, the processing part probably will help you because you're a problem solver. But the problem is that with that problem is you don't have the physical skill to go with it. If you're addicted to booze, then you need to get off of that. If you're addicted to pills, that's your first step. Forget all this other stuff, because if you have not got that cognitive ability, if your medical needs, and that could also be your physical needs, like going to the gym, get in better shape. I have to do that. I have to take the time to do that. Education needs. You got to learn the know-how. You need to get yourself, at the very minimum, some good books. And you need to go out and practice those skills. YouTube is great. And if you think you watched it and said, hey, wow, I watched this, so, I don't need to do anything else. It isn't the same thing. What you're going to find when you get out there is you have to deal with the elements, and you've got to deal with a certain amount of things like, I didn't think that the sun was going to go down that quickly. And here I am, and I have no shelter belt. I didn't bring much with me. When I was a kid, all right, I took a lot of these courses and classes. I did them through all kinds of youth groups, and I was fortunate enough to have parents that really were like, yeah, go take that class. And there's some I didn't get to take that I always wanted to take. What you will hear over and again is to learn to make everything with a couple of simple tools like a knife, an axe, and a saw, and then throw those tools away and make them. Them being the knife, the axe, and the saw. My wife refers to it as the magoober effect, or she says you're magoobering it. I don't know what that means, but hey, sure. Being able to make things on the fly. Somebody has a pack full of $1,000 worth of equipment, and nature has a way, as one of the greats in the survival industry said, of getting things away from you. I can speak to that. I've seen it. I've done it. I've had it happen. You turn around. I was on a trip one time and I lost my single one spoon. So what did I do? Well, I carved another spoon. And I used it for the rest of the week, and it wasn't a problem. And then I threw the spoon away. But I could have easily and quickly have also carved chopsticks. And that probably would have even been faster and easier in throwing them away. You see, it is within all of us to change our lives, our skills, and our abilities at a moment's notice. We only need the will to do it. You'll find it. You'll figure it out. And this is no guarantee that you're going to do well or survive a situation. I can't tell you what happened. If you crash in a plane and you have some physical damage, I can't guarantee you're going to make it. No one can. But I can guarantee you one thing, that if you don't have certain skills, you're not going to make it. One of those skills may be as simple as I'm not going to give up. You have that mental ability. Or what's more important is you have a community that's with you. And a community can be a couple of people who are going to help you along the way. And that's a skill in itself. All right, let's get to that list. There are 12 essentials every pack should have. Now, there's more that you can add. I understand that, but this is probably what I would consider the base. Now, included with this, is obviously some snacks, your lunch, but these are the things that you should be bringing along on any trip or anytime you go out into the woods. First and foremost is a good pocket knife. A folder, first and foremost, is a good pocket knife. I prefer a Victorinox myself. I like the Backpacker. The Hunter's pretty good too. But that's just my personal choice. I've seen people use all kinds of pocket knives. It really doesn't matter as long as you have a good, sharp pocket knife. 2, compass and a map, and you got to know how to use them. 3, a fire starter. Now, I would carry at the very least 2 lighters. However, when you get into having something like a ferrocium rod, which is a sparker, it's a fake flint. It is not real and true flint and steel. You want to have a candle or two and some kind of case to put those that candle in so you have some form of light. Now, as well as that candle, if you don't want to bring just a candle, because a candle really does dual purpose, it can also be used as a fire starter, a headlamp in its place, and I'm going to tell you why you can replace it in a few minutes, but a form of light. Next, we're looking at 2 contractor bags. And these contractor bags can be stuffed to make some form of a blanket. You're looking for a waterproof poncho. I have a design I make which is based completely on a tarpaulin, not necessarily blue, it could be brown, a small tarp, and I create a poncho with it. And you can use that poncho for shelter. You can use that poncho, obviously, to stay dry. Next, we're looking at a folding saw, which is, most people refer to as a pruning saw. You need some kind of a saw. 2 canteens, 1 liter each, and these can be plastic. They don't have to be metal. I definitely carry steel canteens and steel water bottles whenever possible. They are great. They can be used by themselves in the fire as for heating water, for boiling water, but honestly speaking, it's not really necessary for the 12 essentials here, because you also are going to carry a metal pot, and that pot really is a very small coffee pot, like the one that goes into a kit, or just any kind of a pot that does not have a handle. We used to call those belly pots, that has a bail on it. I've even carried coffee can tins, but it's getting really hard to find coffee cans that are made out of metal with a wire bail. You just need a pot. And honestly, the best is find yourself a very small coffee pot that goes into a camp cook set. Cord or rope, you're looking at 50 foot of paracord. A first aid kit with Polar Pure water purification or water pure tablets as well, iodine tablets in that kit. Part of the first aid kit is that you're going to include your water purification in here. Now, there are 3 different ways that I've used for water purification over the years. One of those has been a filter. I have used iodine, and Polar Pure is a form of iodine, but it's kind of like an endless supply of iodine. I've also used Clorox, just straight Clorox bleach. The problem with bleach is I've also had bleach fall and get broken and in the container, and you got bleach all over your pack or whatever you're carrying, and it will eat a hole in things. But honestly, it works pretty well. It works really well. Never had any problems. The reason that I used Clorox bleach originally was on the advice of an old Vietnam vet who had gone through several tours and never gotten sick purifying his water using bleach. Probably the main problem there is you have to really watch your sunlight usage to make sure it doesn't get out in the sun. It will denature, it will go away and then be ineffective. Also, like all water purification methods, bleach is temperature sensitive. So you have to make sure you give yourself enough time to make sure it does its jobs. Also, a lot of people don't think about this when they're doing water purification. Loosen the cap on whatever you're purifying and put a little water through the screws, put a little water through the threads so that you purify that as well. And that's kind of like one of the mistakes a lot of people make, and then they get sick. Let me be really clear about any purification method. Go to the manufacturer of whatever that particular type of purification is. Follow their directions. Don't take what you hear or that you think you heard, go directly to them. Clorox bleach is authorized as a form of water purification by the company. I'm not giving you percentage or how to do it. Go to their website and find out. They will tell you it is available. For my area, some of the nasties we have in the water are cryptosporidium as well as Giardia lambda, which you really got to look at. There's a lot of things going back and forth about how long to boil water. For example, one of the things that you see is boiling water. Now, boiling water is absolutely one of the easiest ways to purify your water. Here's the problem. I've never seen anybody truly agree on how long you're supposed to boil it. I have seen reports where it says boil it until a rolling boil, keep it 1 minute, and then shut it off. I've seen other reports from Cornell University which said that the Giardia cyst can live much longer. I have to ask a fundamental question. If you're in a hospital and they have instruments, how long do those instruments that they use sit in an autoclave to kill everything in it? So keep that in mind. One of the other things that is very useful is absolutely sunlight. I have also tried some of the I've tried one of the pens which put out UV light. I have a problem with it because it takes a battery. I've tried it. I never got sick, but that doesn't mean anything. That could be anecdotal. But we did do tests with it at the place I worked. Those got sent to water testing, and everything came back fine. However, you got to look at this test we went out to the pond and got some. I don't know if they did a double blind test where they actually took a water sample and submitted it for comparison. I'm not really sure. I wasn't privy to that part of the experiment. The two things I can absolutely tell you are that if you use some form of an iodine, that is a manufactured, specified process, and then there is really no question at that point. That is on the manufacturer to make sure that that's correct. Also, if you are using a filtration system or a filtration pump, that has been approved by the manufacturer. So I would be remiss to tell you anything other than the fact that boiling water is also approved, as when they say a boil water order is in effect by the health department. So that's another thing that you can verify, and what I would look is to their guidance to find out what they suggest is correct. And I can't tell you if that varies. So you got to do some of your own research. You should never depend on one source. You really need to ask these questions. All right, let's review the 11 essentials out of the 12. So the first 11 that I've given you are 1, a good pocket knife, 2, compass and map, 3, a form of fire starter, 4, some kind of light, 5, 2 contractor bags, 6, a waterproof poncho, 7, a folding saw, 8, 2 canteens, which are going to be either metal or plastic as long as it's approved for drinking water, right? We don't want plastic that is not. A metal pot. Now, by the way, let me throw one other metal pot idea here because I really wanted to review this. I really like just a Canteen cup, which is larger than a regular folding cup or a Sierra cup. Now, I've carried those too as well. They do work. However, I will say a Canteen cup is a good alternative for your metal pot. So keep that in mind. And it depends. One of the questions here is, are you going lightweight? Are you going heavy? So one of the questions are you really trying to go really super ultra lightweight? I get it. So let's move on. Oh, by the way, titanium. They make a lot of really cool titanium stuff now. Number 10. A cord, in this case 50 foot of paracord, and 12 a first aid kit. And then we're going to talk about, oh, by the way, the first aid kit has to have some form of water purification with it. Now we're going to talk about number 12. Okay, it's time to talk about number 12. My final piece. And you're going to say, John, you just copped out on us, man. You just threw in the whole thing in one shot. And that number 12 is a survival kit. And that kit, the one that I recommend, forget all of those little candy tin kit. I got really good use for a couple of candy tins. There are several. I can give you 3 right off the top. First and foremost, it's a way to make char cloth if you've never made it. Secondly, it is really great for a independent fishing kit. That is awesome for that. And third, it's a great thing to keep candy in. All right. So I'm going to up it a little bit. What I like to carry is number 12, which is my soapbox survival kit. You know, when you go to the stores and you get one of those things that holds soap, your bar soap. Remember bar soap before there was body wash? Anyway, they put it in, you put your bar soap into this plastic travel case. That case is what I use to build the basis of my soapbox survival kit. And we're running out of time today, so I can't really go over what's in that kit, but it does encompass just about everything in here. It gives you everything in here. All of the components are in that soapbox survival kit. Included in there are ways to gather food. There are ways to do fishing. So you see, we cover the rest with that kit. Now, can I tell you something? If you want to break down to the point where you throw just the soapbox survival kit in it, is it enough? No. And the reason why is because it doesn't cover a few components like shelter. But I will say this, that alone, combined with, carrying a pocket knife, will probably get you pretty darn far. So, in any event, that is number 12, my soapbox survival kit. Look, one of the things as a bonus I also want to throw in, one of the things that we used to carry when I was taking groups out, I worked a lot with juvenile offenders for about 6 years. We took them into the wilderness. And the process that we use with them, I suggest to you, you will start, if you're an expert already, then man, you're so much ahead of the game. But I give you this as an expert to learn to teach other people, because you should be doing that. If you're an expert, in my estimation, you better be passing your knowledge on. And by the way, I always learn something from someone, and my students especially. So now I want to throw this out at you. What we used to carry, every one of the members of the group had to carry a plastic wrapped, waterproofed, polyprop top and bottom long underwear, a pair of socks, and a wool cap. That was ditch gear. The whole idea is you fell in the water, you got, super wet, you could get down, get into these polypros, and then you would have, your socks and your hat. You want to throw in a pair of wool gloves? That's great too. But so you say this person is now standing around. No, that person is not standing around. That person is drying their clothes, and we're getting a fire going because we've got to use BTUs to get it dry. Some people, and rightly so, will tell you they want to have a whole group of people that never use a fire in the outdoors. They do not want to. Well, here's what I got to say about that. And there's a couple of things that annoy me. First of all, if you've never been to a refinery and the process it takes to extract oil, because what are they going to use? They're going to use alcohol. But this is food cooking, right? But BTUs, they're going to use some form of naphtha. They're going to use some form of petroleum product to cook their food with a stove. So I get it. I get the idea that there is a fear and a problem with people who are not good with campfires. Most of the fires that we have found find their way back to usually either an electrical problem or somebody has used something like a chainsaw, motor, and engine, which has ignited a fire. Now, or it's arson, right? Straight up arson. Yeah, there have been people who have who have actually destroyed our environment by being careless with fire. And to those people, I know it exists, and I'm going to acknowledge there are people who have been careless with fires. There is no question. And for those people, it's beyond shame on you. It's criminal. I get it. Now we got to ask the question. So I've given you that this is your ditch gear, you fall through. We had one other component that we took with us because we had one sleeping bag per group. All right, one sleeping bag. And that was for hikes. We're talking day use here. The single sleeping bag that was brought on the day use was to be used for everything as creating a litter, perhaps. Could be used to warm somebody who had fallen in the water after they changed. Okay, so that's pretty much it for today. I really want to say thanks to everybody for being here. So in coming editions, we're going to talk about a few of the things that are outlined below in the description, as well as the fact we'll have a few really cool announcements, and we're going to get deeper into our homestead. So for right now, that's all the time we have today for this podcast, but join us for the next podcast, and we're going to continue this conversation. I'm John Elden Gibbons with Teresa Landry. Thanks for tuning in. We are so grateful for you joining us today, and we have to say thanks for your continued support. It's time to ask yourself, what am I waiting for? Because it's time to live deliberately. Your journey can start now. This has been a Gibbons Media production, all rights reserved, 2021 John Gibbons Media. This podcast is licensed to and distributed by Mustard Sprout Media, LLC, and is fully responsible for the content.